Final exam review, question number 10. A well-known brokerage firm executive claims that 90% of investors are currently confident of meeting their investment goals. An XYZ investor optimism survey conducted over a 2-week period found that a sample of 200 people, 89% of them said they are confident of meeting their goals. Use the theoretical method to test the claim that the proportion of people who are confident is smaller than 90% at a 5% confidence level or 0.05 confidence level. So this question is clearly, let's dissect what we have here. So I'm just going to pull the notes here. I'm going to highlight a few things. Here, notice that we have 90% of the investors are currently confident of meeting their goals. That is the population proportion that we have. And then after they took a sample of 200, so N, in this case, this is N. So the sample size is N, 200 people. They found out that 89% of them said that they are confident of meeting their goals. So this is basically P hat, which is the proportion that comes from the sample. We want to test the claim that the proportion of people who are confident is smaller. So that's our claim. Smaller than 90%, which should match the population proportion, and this is the significance level, which is basically alpha. So alpha is equal to 0.05. So what do we have so far? We can write the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis states that the population proportion is currently 90%. But then after they took the sample, they want to test the claim that the proportion is less than 0.90, smaller than. That is where that came from. Notice how what doesn't change is the population proportion remains the same. The equal sign is always with the null hypothesis an equal sign, and this proportion is always the population proportion. That does not change. So this is basically the hypothesis we're looking for, which is I can tell the first one doesn't count. It deals with mu. This deals with mu also. This is two-tailed test, not it. This deals with mu, so it cancels. This one is almost there, but this sign is wrong, so it's not that option. So it's this option right here. And this is basically a left-tailed test because this points to the left side. As you can see here, it points to the left side, so it's a left-tailed test. So what do we have? We have the population proportion is 0.90 or 90%. We have N is equal to 200, and then we have P hat is equal to 0.89. So we were not given X here or the number of successes, but we are given P hat. And we have alpha, which is 0.05. So we're going to take these and we're going to head to the online calculator. And the online calculator we'll be using is testing hypotheses for, or z-test for proportions. Testing hypotheses for proportions or z-test for proportions. So we're going to go to the online calculator. And we're going to go to z-test of a proportion. The null hypothesis is 0.90, and then it's the left tail test. N is 200. The number of successes is not given, but the sample proportion was given, which is 0.89. And then the significance level is 0.05 or 5%. What do we need here? We need the test statistic. So I'm just going to go to the question here, and it's a left tail test. The test statistic is that one, and then we need the p-value. So I'm just going to go to the calculator and type or copy the p-value. And then we are going to make our decision. So notice here that the p-value is not less than alpha, which means we're going to fail to reject the null hypothesis. The rule says, basically says if p is low, so the rule says if the p-value is lower than alpha, reject HO, which is the null hypothesis, okay? In other words, if it's not less than alpha, we can fail to reject the null hypothesis, or the decision is going to be failing to reject the null hypothesis. And in this case, p-value is not lower than alpha, so we're going to fail to reject the null hypothesis. In other words, we can say that the test statistic is outside of the rejection region, and the interpretation for this question is going to be, or the conclusion, because we failed to reject the null hypothesis, that means we do not have sufficient evidence to support the claim, and our claim is presented here. So the claim that the proportion of people who are confident is smaller than 90% at the significance level given. I'm just going to type that part and paste it here, the claim, and I'm going to remove that because it's redundant. So we do not have sufficient evidence to support the claim that the proportion of people who are confident in their investment is smaller than 90% at the 0.05 confidence level. So that is basically how you're going to answer that question. And remember, the last part is always the interpretation usually is not graded automatically. So if you get 70%, that means you get the question right.